Welcome to the Better Together podcast, where we look for ways we can work together to advance the gospel of Jesus Christ. Today we have with us Pastor Shiloh Hackett. He's part of the missions board. He's actually the chair of the missions board here in the state of Tennessee, where I'm at today. And he's had the experience of revitalizing two different churches. And so Pastor Shiloh is going to join us today and talk about some of the pitfalls to church revitalization, but also I think you're going to hear some of the steps that we need to take and the blessing that church revitalization can be. So, Pastor Shiloh, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
You're living in Tennessee now, but there was a point where you lived in Alabama and worked, and that was really your first experience with church revitalization, wasn't it?
Yes, sir. In 2007, my wife and I went to Alabama. When the church voted, there was 55 people. They had just lost their pastor due to a death. He'd been there 21 years. They were on a decline. And so God just was able to use us and them in a mighty way to, I believe, bring healing first within the congregation, and then get them on board and be more passionate about reaching out to those in their community. And that was my first pastor. I've been a youth pastor up to that point.
I see. And so maybe even at that point, you probably didn't really even think of the word revitalization. You know, it might not have been that big of a deal out in the church world and so forth. You were just trying to help them to be a healthy church, it sounds like, and trying to help them to do the things we see in the gospel that churches do.
Yes, sir. I believe, of course, being new, you don't know what you're getting into. Of course, my father is a pastor, and my father-in-law was a pastor, so I was able to get some guidance. But I never thought about that word, like you're saying, revitalization. It was more of, these are some problems that I see. This is a trend that's been going on for a while. And so how can we adjust that trend? And really, how can we get people to buy into what we're doing? Because the old adage is we've always done it that way, and it's not ever changed. So that was a struggle. But what advice I got was, love the people. Let them know that you love them. Let them know that you've bought into your vision, your mission, but more importantly, that you've bought into them and love them. And you've probably heard it said as well, if people know that you love them, they'll overlook bad preaching. And so they did that a lot. So, but it was a good experience.
No, I'm sure there was a lot of good preaching, a lot of good teaching in there too, because that's a key component of all of this. But regardless, we know that things sure did get better, didn't they? You moved from those plus people, and over a series of years, it was a different place when you left it to go to Bethlehem.
Yes, sir. We started just implementing small things. I think if somebody's not careful, they'll try to put all these things, all these new programs, all these new things in line, and they don't let them have enough time to, I guess you'd say, click. And then there's usually backlash for that. So we just started doing things a little slow. And one of the things that I believe that worked the best was having people take ownership of their ministry, instead of just coming and serving in a Sunday school lesson or something. This was their ministry. And so that helped a whole lot. And one of the examples that I always give is I allowed my teachers to just paint their classrooms. I didn't give them not this color, I should have done that, but decorate however you want to. And some of our teachers for our kids did that, and they were bright, but the kids loved them. It caused more excitement. You had kids coming and saying, "Hey, Mom, look at my classroom," instead of, this is where I've always gone. So it kind of pushed off some excitement. And then another issue that I saw there, and I'm just going to pinpoint on one, was we had trustees, but they didn't know what they were supposed to do. I know, the old version of trustees was they were over the deeds and those things. And I think since churches are incorporated, it's still important, but it's not that big of a deal as it used to be. And so we gave our trustees job descriptions. gave our ministries job descriptions. And so people now knew what they were supposed to do, instead of, well, this person's always done it this way. And so they kind of had something to go on, and it gave them, I guess you'd say, more ownership of, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, instead of, I'm just here and I have a title type of thing.
So I'm kind of picking up, they were ready. Sometimes they might have moved slow, but you kind of moved slow with them. You kind of helped them,
Yes,
and brought them along. But then they owned it. You're not
Yes,
micromanaging them. If you want to paint your classroom a bright color, and you didn't beat them up, what are your trustees doing? You're like, hey, how about let's work on this, develop job descriptions, and people just started working together.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That was the beginning of fixing some things internally. It's kind of like, it'd be bad. I view like getting on an airplane. They tell you to make sure you put your oxygen mask on first before you try to help somebody else. And so I felt like if we could get the internal things fixed, then God was going to bless us with other people to come in, because we'd be ready for them. And I know that may sound bad, and I hope you understand where I'm going with that. I think some of our churches have not looked internally in like a doctor's diagnosis and say, hey, this is a big issue, and try to fix those before they try to do something bigger. And so we started doing some things internally, getting some things in order. And it wasn't in 3 months we just blew up. It was a slow process, but it had to start from fixing those things internally first.
So internally, you're working, you're trying to help the church be healthy, trying to help the church, if my memory is correct, also to look good, to be appealing to people that would come your way. And then you're kind of moving to the next process of actually trying to reach people, impact people in your community. How did that first church at Muscle Shoals, how did that kind of work there?
They had always, their idea of outreach had always been that old Operation Saturation, where you would go and knock on 500 doors. And when I got there, being new, I was like, hey, let's do it. And two leaders were like, hey, we've done this 4 or 5 times in the last couple of years, and we only got one family. So I was like, okay, well, how can we do something different? I started looking at resources. There was a book called Ignite by Nelson Searcy. And he talks about having these big days so that you can trickle people in, get them to get on your campus. And you already know the 2 big days that are there, Easter and Christmas. And so with Easter, we started doing an egg hunt. What we would do is, and we learned this when I was a youth pastor in North Carolina, a flashlight egg hunt. Nobody was doing those. So you have it at night. You have eggs that are glow in the dark. We had places where they could go, and we just started having people come to our campus for days like that. And it just started getting bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point that now people in the community knew, hey, on such day, this church is going to have something safe for our kids. And then while we're there, we're training our people to be friendly. Everybody got candy, but they also got an invite card to our church. They also had to fill out information before they came, safety protocol as well. But doing stuff like that, and then doing even things within our Sunday school. I'm a big believer. I don't think Sunday school's dead, and I don't care if you call it connection class, life group. We started having our classes do once or every other month big days, where they would go to somebody's house and then invite people in the church that aren't coming to a life group, or friends that aren't going to church, because they'd more likely come and hang out with you at your home and eat and watch football. And then they'd get to know some other people, and then they'd show up on Sunday. And so it was interesting watching that. Now, it takes a lot of traction. We had that. We had a fall festival as well. And I believe like the first few ones we had, they were kind of down in number. And I think that sometimes it's easy to say, hey, this is terrible, we're not doing it again, we didn't have anybody. But we have to understand sometimes it takes a little bit more traction. And another thing, I don't know if you're going to hit on this, is just advertising with that. I don't believe most churches are using the free advertisement that we have. And I'm not an expert, so what I started doing was just getting pictures and making something and then putting on Facebook and having our people share it. And this was before you could do Facebook ads. And so they would share it within the community, any big day we had. And then we started seeing we'd get more people that way as well. So, but like I said, it starts small, but it's got to take some time to get some traction. And let me say this, I don't mean to keep going. Whatever you do, you got to do it with excellence. You can't just put something together. And I'll give you an example here. When I first got here at Bethlehem, and I've told this story before, they just had an egg hunt, and we'd only been here a month, so Nicole and I didn't know what this was going to be like. There was only 20 people, and it was basically our church people, and 5 of them was my family. And all I said was, this isn't good, because there was no advertisement, there was no community involvement. And so we just started asking the questions, what's the point? If the point is for us just to have things within our church, that's fine, but we got to do a better job of inviting people, with outreach. And I shared this story. So the next year we did a flashlight egg hunt at our church. We advertised, and it ended up being bad in the sense that we had over 500 people show up, and we weren't ready. But we made sure that everything we were doing was done right, done with excellence. And I'll go back to what I said earlier. People started buying into it, where they were donating gifts. They were inviting family members, grandkids. And then it caused an excitement to the point of, hey, we got to do this again next year because of what we saw this year.
So both with Bethlehem and Muscle Shoals, what you're saying is you would do activities. Sounds like people are learning a lot from these activities, probably growing together as well, and
yes, sir,
starting to buy into things, and just getting better and better and wanting to do things with excellence. It also sounds like, I know at times, Shiloh, you all have spent money, but you've taken advantage of the free things available. You talked about social media even before Facebook was really a big thing, which is hard for, I bet, many of our listeners to imagine that, but there was a time.
Yeah.
And so you would just, hey, think about it. You're at the fall festival, take a picture, share it. And even back then at Muscle Shoals, they were starting to do that kind of thing.
Yes, sir. It was, and it was even before Canva. I know some of our listeners will know that. So like I said, I wasn't an expert. I was just putting stuff together. And what I found out too, going back to that take ownership, there's people within your church that are good at media. They're good. We have a lady now in our church that started her own business just out of social media. And so we did a panel discussion a couple of weeks ago at our church about first impressions and using that. And so there's a lot of free advertisement. But now we're using the free advertisement for them to share. But now I'm spending maybe $100 for event for our egg hunt, $100 maybe for our trunk or treat. And our trunk or treat surpasses, it's close to our egg hunt. Now we can't use our facilities for our egg hunt. We have to go to the park and do that, which we bring in food trucks now. But our trunk or treat, we wanted to have it on our campus. And you've been to our campus, and we have around 700 people show up. But the excitement that the people have is great. And then the thing that I've been amazed at is I'm getting contact as a pastor from people in the community saying, hey, are you having that event? And they've even made statements like, you always have a safe environment for our children. That's key, and so that is key. And then you talk about advertisement. One year we didn't even have to pay for anything. A photographer came, and I didn't know they were doing this. They took pictures, and it was in the paper. And so it was just free advertisement of this is what's going on. And with us being here 7 years and then Alabama 10, the word gets out in your community of whether or not your church is actively involved. And I don't know if it's Tom Rayner who said this or asked this, but one of the church growth experts asked it, if your church closed tomorrow, would anybody in your community know? And so I even have a story about that kind of convicted me that I can say at a later time, that I believe if churches are not known in their community, we're not being that light that's set up on a hill being a beacon of hope for our community. So it's not just about having big events. The whole purpose is to give people the gospel. And our trunk or treat, we have some Gideons in our church, and we passed out Bibles. And the coolest thing that happened this year was we got to hear a kid say, "Hey, Mom, look, I got a Bible." And it was just, we don't think about that, especially in America, about not having a Bible. But this little kid was so excited that he got his first Gideon New Testament. And so I think that was just well worth the whole event. So.
There's a Wall Street Journal article, I think it was yesterday, talked about how Bible sales have just taken off. And so we do take that for granted. You know, we've got a whole generation that's missed out on that. So you're providing a safe place, safe activities, but you're trying to get them to do the next step to come to your church. But even in these events, they're getting Bibles and they're recognizing you as a safe place in the community, as a place that cares about me, and as a place I can learn more about the Lord spiritually as well.
Yes, sir. And one example I'll give you is I was in a nursing home visiting one of our members, and I walked down the hall and a lady asked me, she said, "Are you the pastor at Bethlehem?" And when somebody asks me, I always say, "It just depends." And she said, "You don't know me, but I know you and what your church is doing. And I just want to thank you for all that you do for our community." And she don't go to our church. I've never seen her before. And it did a couple things for me. Number one, you got to be careful because people recognize you. But then the other thing, it was like, you know, wow, what we're doing, at times we feel like we failed. But really our outreach events, we want people to come to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. But more than likely, this is going to sound bad, they're probably not going to come to saving knowledge of Christ at that event. But that seed will be sown at that event, and we may get the product from that, or another church down the road may, and that's fine. It's just we're just trying to get out there and help our community and let them know, hey, we care, we love you. During COVID, our church has a great heart, and they decided to give every teacher in Cheatham County a $25 gift card within our surrounding area. And just doing that, we had teachers crying, but it's the idea of like, I think we have churches in communities, and the communities don't know the churches are there. And if they know the churches are there, they don't understand that those churches really care about them. And so you got to be proactive with that.
And that does remind me a little bit of the story you mentioned a minute ago. I think that was you went and the person didn't even know a church was still in existence, right? And it was
yes, sir.
Just going there to close it down.
There's a place in Muscle Shoals, and if anybody's from Muscle Shoals, they'll know this place. It was called Garden Gate, and it's right across the street. I mean, there's a main road, but you can see our church steeple, and I'm sitting there eating, and I'm inviting the waitress to our church, and I say the name of the church, and she said, "Where's that at? I've never heard of it." And my heart just sunk, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And I think I literally just said, "Are you kidding me?" And she's like, "Yes." And so I said, "Well, come with me real quick." And I just opened the front door, and I said, "You see that steeple? That's the church." And I do believe I had a meeting after that with some of our leaders and just said, "Hey, they don't even know across the street that we're here." And I think, Dr. Moody, if we're honest, our churches believe people know that their church is in the community, but the reality may be they don't. And that could be a church that's been there 100 years. It may have become a museum, but it's not become a place where people know, hey, this church cares, this church is active, this church is doing great things in our community. And it does take, you may know this a little bit from us being on a board together. I like to be around people, but I'm really an introvert. I like to stay to myself a little bit. And so me being proactive it causes me to get out of my comfort zone. And I think for our churches, we have become introverted, and we need to get out of our comfort zone, because God's not called us to stay. He's called us to go. And so, but that one time with that waitress, it just kind of sparked something within me, not just there, but even here in Ashland City. Do people know that our church is even here? And we're just right beside the high school. And I've still had people, when I say the name Bethlehem, they'll say, well, where is that at? And I cringe a little, not because I want them to know our church in a glorified way. I just want them to know that our church is here and doing things for God that'll be impactful for eternity.
Yeah, just like you'd want to know where the hospital is or the fire station.
Exactly. Yeah, those are important places.
That's where there are places important in the community. And there's so many stories. I had confused your story with another, where a mission leader went to close a church down, and the guy's like, he used to go there, he used to be a part of it. He thought it had been going away a long time ago. There's too many stories like that. That's what you're really saying. And so thank the Lord that's not the case with Bethlehem and so many other churches who've gotten on this road. We could talk all day, and I do encourage people to attend your seminar at the National this coming year in Kansas City. And it's just a way, and I encourage folks to take lay people to that as well.
Yes.
Not just pastors. We find that with the boot camps when leaders come, as well as their lay people, it gets them kind of ready to go. Just like you saying, paint your classroom how you want to paint it. Got your people involved. But before we shut down, I want to get into a little bit of, there are pitfalls, aren't there? There are things to be alert to. So how about sharing some of that with our listeners? Some of the hard things, which it's all in a way hard, but there's some things we need to be on the lookout for, aren't there?
The biggest barrier for me, and I know other people are going to be different, but I think it's true in churches, is everybody's afraid of change, even though we're changing every day. But what I've had to learn is some people are holding on to a memory, and that memory may be tied to a chair. It may be tied to a something that's got, for us, it was placards in memory of somebody. And so they're tied to a lot of these things that they may need to be updated. And doing that, people are thinking you're trying to kill the memory of somebody, or you just don't want anything. And so it causes tension. And so I think that the hardest thing that I've had to learn is, just because me and somebody else may disagree, it doesn't mean I love the church more and they love the church less, or they love the church more and I love the church less. We actually both love the church. We both desire for the church to grow. Our views and how we do it are going to be different. And if we're not careful, we'll make a mountain out of a molehill, or a color of carpet. And we really need to go back, and what we've had to do is, what is our mission of the church? What did God call us to do? And when everybody buys into what God's called us to do, then all of us, including myself, and I know you know this from counseling, compromise is not a bad word. It can be in some scenarios, but there's sometimes that we have to compromise, give and take, and that's been helpful. The other pitfall is, if you try to do it too fast and you don't have anybody following you, you're not going to have a long tenure at your church. Of course, I tell everybody, I did the thing that you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to follow anybody with longevity. And I followed somebody that was at 21 years in Alabama, and then Brother Randy Korn, it was 21 years here. I followed him. So I already blew that out of the water. So that's a pitfall. The other pitfall, I would say, is not being patient, and getting discouraged too easy. Kind of like churches go through, I think Dr. Rayner talks about, and even Aubrey Malfrey talks about the S curves. You'll go up and then you go back down, and then you go up and you go back down. And I think if you're not careful on that downward heel, you think you're done. You think there's no hope, but you don't realize that God has something He's going to do, and you're going to go back up, and you're going to go higher than you were before. So that's been the biggest pitfall for me, is, and I'd say that's twofold: not getting so focused on numbers that you forget that those are souls, but because numbers are important, but you can get so caught up in that you miss the whole aspect of ministry. And every Monday, every pastor quits. We know that. And so just always realize that you may be on the downward of the S curve, but it's just going to take a few adjustments and you'll be able to go back up. And I think the hardest thing for me has been, there's been times that we shot up, and then we went back down. And then the next time we went up, it was a little bit. And so I have two of my deacons have to remind me here. I'll say, man, we were down this Sunday. And they're like, well, 5 years ago, this would have been the greatest number in the world for us. And so it's always keeping things in perspective with that. And then just always remember that people should be, besides Christ, people ought to be first. Love your people. Let them know that you're real. Don't bulldoze them, and just be very patient, and let God work in them, because they may come to you someday. This has happened a couple of times to me. They may come and say, hey, I get it now. I see what you're trying to do. Before I didn't, but now I do. And some of those people will be your best supporters. At first, you may not feel like they are, but in the end, they're your best supporters, and they're the ones that really, really are going to stick with you through the thick and thin.
That's great. And I need to say also to our listeners, I'm hoping you're listening to some of what you hear Pastor Shiloh say. Clearly, he has been reading, and clearly he's been studying. He's talking about the S curve, and Dr. Rayner said this, and such said this. So what I hear is there's a hunger, there's a thirst to grow and to learn and to do things with excellence. And you just can't sit back and talk about things being bad. You got to move, and you got to study, and you're out there reading and trying to figure out what other people have done and what we can learn. And it works, doesn't it?
Yes, sir. The best thing that I ever did was just keep reading, keep trying to stay up to date on things. Even reading things that you normally wouldn't read because it may be boring, but it's going to help you. I always tell about the Advanced Strategies book by Aubrey Malford. It's a hard read. Some people may not think, but it's a hard read. But if you actually read it and take the time to digest it, it's got some powerful stuff in there. And then be willing to reach out, show some humility, ask for help. I think that's me and Dr. Dwyer have talked a lot. And I think that is we call it the elephant in the room in our denomination right now is we don't want to ask for help. And this is just my opinion. I think it's because if I ask for help and this guy shows me how to do it, then my people may want him to come and be the pastor instead of me. And I believe that all of us have good intentions. And I don't think our intentions is that way, but we got to ask for help and then be willing to take that help. I'm not going to say a name, but I was trying to help somebody years ago, and everything I said, can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. That won't work here. And finally, I just said, how do you know? I mean, how do you know until you try? And so the things that I'm doing may not work in your setting, but something similar will. And it's like I told you at the Refresh conference. To me, it's not hard of what we're doing. Like once it gets going, it's hard making the decision to do it and sticking with doing things with excellence. I mean, that's all the way from your nursery program, all the way to when you get up to preach, make sure you're doing everything with excellence, because your visitors take notice of that too. And I know we didn't have time because of the time limit, but we could even talk about first impressions and all those things of how all these little things, we don't think they're important, but they're a big deal. It used to be 11 minutes when somebody stepped foot on your campus. They made a decision. Now it's down to 7 minutes. And then me and you know this, they're not even on your campus before they made a decision. They're on your website and they've made a decision just like that. So just make sure we're doing everything with excellence.
So some of our listeners may say, he's talking about first impressions. He's talking about our website. Oh, me, I feel overwhelmed. But you start little, and that's what you did in both of these situations, built little by little. And 7 years now at Bethlehem and 10 years at Muscle Shoals, it builds. Everything builds upon itself over time, doesn't it?
Yes, sir. And this is my personality, and I don't know this. I hope this is a lot of pastors. You feel like you're just getting started. Like it's been 7 years, but you feel like you're just getting started because you just fixed this area, and now you're working on this area. And so I believe that God has put in us the idea of we don't have the finished product. That makes sense. I don't know the theology that may be there. So we're always working to try to improve and make things, but kind of like our Christian life, we're always trying to strive to get better. We don't make a Superman bound in our Christian walk. We take baby steps. So you take these baby steps with your church and you look back and you say, man, I'm not where I used to be. I'm not where I need to be, but I'm not where I used to be. And I just take these baby steps and slowly get there. And the other thing is, just like I said, make sure I have a core group of people, not just in my church, but pastors, friends, that I can run things by. I know I've been name dropping here. So Dr. Brad Ransom has helped a lot with just throwing some things back and forth off of him. Jim McComas has come. I've actually, in Alabama, I'll say this, it's a scary thing. I had them come and just assess our whole church. And so, but them doing that, they got to see me, see my heart. I got to see their heart. And so it helped when I had a failure, as far as what I would say with a program or something. They could say, well, have you tried this? Have you done this? And so those are very helpful as well. So
reading, studying, working with others, all that's a key component. So Shiloh, thank you. I so appreciate your heart for helping churches to grow, helping churches to be healthy, not just in your own church, but also what you're doing with the mission board here in Tennessee.
Yes, sir.
We need to mention you all have a Refresh conference every year in September.
Yes, sir.
And you want to say a little bit about that so our listeners understand?
The whole dream came out of we were meeting in a board, and we were trying to figure out how we can get into churches to help them. And so we realized, well, we may not be able to get to churches to help them, but we could have churches come to us. And so it started just by wanting our pastors and our lay people to come. And what we do, just to give you a little background, we have you come in on a Thursday night. The room is paid for. You get to stay Thursday night. On Friday, you can do whatever you want. You can golf with people. You can fish. Your wife can go shop, or you can do the godly thing and take a nap, whatever you need to do. And then at 6 o'clock on Friday night, we have a free meal. And then we have a encouraging message. This year, Brother Chris Dotson for the state of Tennessee is going to be doing the encouraging message. And then we just fellowship afterwards. I know last year some guys didn't leave till almost 11, 12 o'clock. You don't have to do that, but that's what they did. They just wanted to stay around and fellowship. And then Saturday morning, we start back off around 8:30, and we usually have 3 to 4 seminars. And it's just practical stuff, such as last year, you were able to do a perfect one on how to deal with the gender issue in the church. And then we had Ben Crabtree do something on discipleship. I was able to do something on how to turn your church around. And then we always have a seminar for the ladies. And Kristen Crabtree did a powerful one about, I believe it was about how to pray with your husband through storms and through things. And so that was powerful. And then you get to leave at lunch and go back home or whatever you want to do. And everything is taken care of. The only thing you got to do is get there. And we really desire to help. More than anything, I just want people to get encouraged. And then if you have an issue, you can ask us. We're not saying we're experts, but where there's many counselors, there's wisdom. And so we can come together and help with individuals. And it's grown every year. And I think every year it's gotten better. I'm encouraged. It's funny to me, Dr. Moody, because we want to encourage other people, and then we go and we come back and we're more encouraged. And so it's usually it's the first weekend in September, and it's in Sevierville, Kodak, Tennessee, at our missions church. And if you're interested, you can just reach out to me on Facebook or shilohhackett@gmail.com, and I'd love to tell you more about it. It's just an exciting thing that we're doing.
Well, you guys do a phenomenal job. I appreciate what you're doing, and you're listening, you're thinking, oh, well, we can't do that in our state. Well, you could probably do some semblance of that, So,
Yeah.
and like you say, it's gotten better, and you build on it every year. You're just really saying start with something and have some encouragement and have the ability for people to learn, and let it grow from there.
Yeah, I think because of being an American, I don't know any other better way to say that. We're skeptical of anything free. So yeah. I think there for a while, people were like, what are they trying to sell us? Are they going to take up an offering? But we've had people donate to do this. Certain national entities have given money so that we could do this. And I do believe other states, I'd love to see other states do this for their pastors. And it's just not pastors. I think in the first mindset, it was just pastors. And now hey, bring your lay leaders. And one church brought 15 people last year. And it was good because now, as well as I do, you go to a seminar, you get pumped up, you try to share it with your people, they're not as pumped up. But if they were with you and they heard it and got pumped up, then you're going back with almost a force of saying, man, this was good. We do need to try these things. And they're encouraged as well. And the coolest thing I think that we do every year is when the people that are not pastors pray over the pastors. And so last year, a man I don't even know came up and prayed over me, and you get a connection there. And so that was just it was a good feeling to be a part of that. So.
Well, you guys are doing a great job, and you're doing a good job. We appreciate the great job you're doing there at Muscle Shoals, now at Bethlehem. And I've had the opportunity to see that. And Shiloh, just really appreciate you and Nicole. We didn't even get into her, but what a great service as a teacher and now as a principal. And it's another way for you guys to give back to your community. We greatly appreciate you. We appreciate you also taking the time to be with us today.
Well, I appreciate you, and I appreciate all you're doing for our denomination. And, we didn't get to know each other until a couple of years ago on a board, but I do appreciate you and your ministry and what you're doing for us as Free Will Baptists. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. And thank you, brother. And thank you for you guys listening today. We appreciate you too, don't we, Shiloh, for taking the time to listen and be a part of this. And we encourage you to reach out to Shiloh, reach out to me for ways that you might be able to help enhance what's happening at your church and maybe what's happening in your state, trying to encourage people there. We mentioned a little bit Brad Ransom and the North American Ministries boot camps that they do. That's a way to do some of these things or to bring some of it to your own church or community. We also mentioned the National. So the seminar that you gave, Shiloh, at Refresh is on the lines of one of the ones you'll do at the National this coming year. And so there will be 90 different seminars in English and in Spanish. So we encourage folks to come, encourage them to go. We want to thank you, Shiloh. We want to thank all of our folks that are listening today. Remember, every little thing we do for the Lord, it really does matter. We truly are better when we work together. We're better together. Thank you for joining us today.